we have the amazing Sabine. Sabine, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am fine, thank you. I was just saying before you joined that everybody knows that I'm a dating and relationship coach, but
Yeah.
I make it my business about every week, once a week or so. I like to interview people and have conversations with people who aren't necessarily directly related to my industry, right?
Right.
But the beauty of my industry, and you probably said the same thing too, the beauty of my industry as a dating and relationship coach is that it is directly related to every decision that we make. Every school that we decide to go to, every home that we decide to buy, every investment we decide to do, there is an element of, well, I'm married, should I play this differently? I'm single, should I play this differently?
Right.
I have children, should I play this differently? And so that's why we have you here. So Sabine, please introduce yourself and let me know and let us know what you do.
Okay, sure. So I'm Sabine Franco, also known as Sabine the Purpose Lawyer. I help create businesses, protect properties, and plan legacies. And my goal is basically to make sure everybody, is safe while they pursue their purpose, their dream, their hustle, all of that, right? So many of us, now we can see nowadays our culture, everyone is all about getting to the money. They're all about building businesses and creating wealth and investing, which is awesome and wonderful. And we want more and more of that. But we also want you to keep it, and we want you to get it to the next generation and leave a mark for yourself. So that's what we focus on.
Excellent. So that's directly in line again with what I do, because a lot of the conversations I have with my clients, their desire is to build a legacy. Their desire is to create a family that they can have this longevity. They can pass on their whatever they are able to attain. But you said you help people attain and keep.
Yes, exactly.
So then that leads me to believe that some people have a hard time holding on to their assets and what they gain.
Yeah. I've had many situations and encounters. In fact, one of the reasons why that made me go further and really position myself in this way as asset protection is because I met a lot of people who either lost properties themselves, or they lost inheritances because it wasn't protected properly, or what they thought they had, they didn't really have. A lot of people didn't understand transferring your deed is really giving away your assets, and just like not really understanding how things sort of work and function in this world. And why? Because that sort of education is not targeted towards our community. And so a lot of people have fallen prey to that. And now everyone is sort of waking up, and I'm just trying to fill that gap to assist people to understand this space. And there's not a lot of attorneys of color that's there to service, our communities.
Makes sense. So let's take a step back, because there may be some folks who are on this live like, what? So let's do like a basic definition. We've heard the term assets over liabilities. If anybody is a big fan of the #1 podcast in the world, Earn Your Leisure, EYL.
Yes, absolutely. Shout out to EYL.
Amazing guys, right? Like that is the line, assets over liabilities. And we say it, but what does that really mean? What is an asset and what's a liability?
Yeah, sure. So an asset is basically anything that you have of value that makes you money, right? So typically it's going to be something that makes you money without you having to exchange time for that money. But even sometimes like a business is an asset, and sometimes you have to exchange time for it. But as long as it makes you money, it's typically going to fall under the asset umbrella. A liability is typically something that's going to cost you money, right? You're shelling money out for that thing. Not all liabilities are bad. Some liabilities could be used to offset taxes and things like that. But generally, you want assets and you don't want liabilities, right? That's how it goes.
So you did mention just now that a business is an asset, but is that really true if the business isn't going well? Talk to us about some of the elements or some of the items that can be considered an asset in one regard, or a liability if the wrong person isn't managing it.
Yeah, so that's right. So if a business is not going well, then yes, it could turn into a liability if it's costing you money, right? So a lot of things that happen where businesses are not going well, people don't have foundational things in order. Like maybe they don't have their business structured properly. Maybe they're paying too much in taxes. Maybe they're not paying attention to their metrics to see how much is coming in and how much is going out. Are they targeting their marketing to the right places to say, okay, this is what's bringing me money, let me do more of that, let me do less of this. So there's a lot of things, you know, in business that can turn it into a liability and ultimately fail. So we have to pay attention to all the areas of our business and make sure that it's actually healthy. And that comes with, you know, checking, assessing, paying attention to what's going on.
Got it. Got it. So another basic question I always hear people talk about, is a house a liability or an asset?
Right. So a house, it can be both, right? If the house is actually making you money. So like if you invested in it, you're renting it out where your tenants are actually paying the mortgage and you're getting a profit from it, then it can be an asset. Typically our personal properties where we're living in, unless you have another asset that's paying for it, maybe you have enough rental properties that's actually paying for the home where you're living in, then it's an asset, right? But if you are paying it and it's not making money for you, then it's you know, starts to look like that liability. However, the tricky thing with a house is that you are building equity. So, you know, it's almost like your cash is still there and it's appreciating to a certain degree. So it kind of depends really, you know, on what it is, but that's typically how we look at, you know, your personal home.
Okay, that makes sense. So you mentioned about protecting your assets. What does it mean? What do you mean? How does one protect an asset?
Yeah. So asset protection is basically, it's making sure that you keep the assets that you have. So your assets are things of value, making sure that you keep them and you protect them from lawsuits. You protect them from debts that could attach to it, like judgments. You protect them from losses, you know, just plain old being irresponsible and losing it, right? So that's asset protection, right? We want to make sure that you keep it and continue to own it. And people who are usually in need of asset protection are like business owners, people who own real estate or own any form of asset. It could even be just, you know, investment accounts and things like that. So anything you have that's of value that's going to continue to appreciate, that can, that has equity in it. Even like your business brand has equity in it because it starts to build value as your business continues to grow. So like if you don't trademark your business, for example, and someone else does before you, you lose that, right? You lose that brand equity because you can no longer say that's you. So protecting those things to make sure that they don't get lost and to make sure that it either continues to grow and you're able to pass it on. That's what we're talking about when we say asset protection.
Okay. So you, Sabine, you're my lawyer and I have a business. How, like, what do you advise me to do? What should I be doing in order to protect my business?
So there's a number of things that we would do. So I'll tell you, just because every business is different, it's not a one size fits all. But what I would say is we want to ask certain questions, right? We want to ask, you know, what are the relationships that you have in your business and how are those relationships being sort of governed? So we might look at, are there contracts we should have in place? Are the contracts that you have, are they covering you? Are they, you know, protecting you in the right ways? Because different activities and businesses open you up to different vulnerabilities. We can't cover everything in every single contract, otherwise we'll have phone books. But, you know, we look to see what it is that you're doing and how you could be, you know, protected. We want to make sure you have things in place like insurance. You want to make sure that the relationships with the owners, if you have multiple owners, that's covered. What does that look like? We want to make sure if you have employees or contractors, is that being covered? You know, so we in businesses, we're looking to see if you have your foundation in place, like if your business is structured properly, if your relationships are covered, if you have insurance, if you're generally record keeping properly, make sure you have all your records in order so that if you want to get loans and you want to build business credit, you have that stuff in order, that you have an accountant and your books are in order. So these are just some things that we sort of look at and ask questions about when we want to assess what your business is doing.
Okay, that makes sense. So for your clients, though, Sabine, it's not only business owners, right? So who are the type of clients you work with? What do they look like? What are their needs?
Okay, that's a good question. So most of my clients, I would say, range from the ages of 25 to to 50, right? That's usually the people who I am dealing with. So in addition to business owners, it's people who have worked and have some assets that they want to protect. Like they may have investment accounts, they may have real estate, they may have children that they want to make sure that their children are cared for. They may have partners where maybe they're not married, but they want to make sure that that person actually gets something, or that person has, rights when it comes to doing like legacy planning, for instance. Let me see who else. So yeah, business owners, people who are either regular everyday people who just have assets and want to make sure that they're protected. It can be, professionals that have specific vulnerabilities, like for instance a doctor has specific vulnerabilities. So things like that, those are my clients. And it could be, when it comes to the business clients, it could be people who are formed and already have their business established, or people who are coming into new industries and wanting to do that as well.
That makes sense. So Sabine, I just want to reset the room so everybody knows what they're walking into at this time. Welcome everyone who is joining. My name is Allison from Align with Allison. I'm a dating and relationship coach, and I primarily work with women to help them find the love and commitment that they deserve. Sabine, do you want to reintroduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Sabine Franco. I'm also known as Sabine the Purpose Lawyer, and I help create businesses, I help protect properties, and I help plan legacies. So you, each and every one of you, are safe as you pursue your purpose, your grind, your hustle, and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So the reason why we're here this evening, as you guys know, I am a relationship coach, and I always preach that every element of our life and every decision that we make can be impacted by our relationship status, our parental status. So I like to have conversations that aren't necessarily directly related to finding your man, right? But we need to talk about like when you're married, what does that look like in terms of insurance? When you are married, what does it look like in terms of investments? When you are not married, but you have children. So that's what we're doing here today. So Sabine, you actually gave us a perfect opportunity to pivot.
Segue.
When you mentioned, when you mentioned partnership versus not married, people with children, so on and so forth. So is there an approach that single people should make in regards to protecting their assets versus married people versus people who are in a relationship? How does that work?
Well, yes. So single people versus married people, we're going to look at different things. When it comes to single people, because they're not, and it depends if they have children as well, right? So I'm going to start with the single person who has no children. So we want to look at if they have any assets, right? And if they do, what is their plan for them? Like, is it that you want things to go to your parents? Is it that you have a friend or a business or a circle that you want to support? We want to look at who's going to take care of you if something would happen to you, right? Or who's going to be there to run your affairs, take care of your whatever it is that you have. If you have if you have real estate, if you have anything, who's going to be there to step in your shoes and handle your business for you, right? So those are something that single people want to think about, as well as, and they don't always want their parents to get, everything that belongs to them. Maybe your parents are older, or maybe your parents are established. So what do you want to do? Like, what is the mark that you want to leave sort of in the world? And then if you have children, then we definitely want to see who's going to be there to take care of your child, in terms of if you're not around, whether the other parent is in the picture or not. We want to start having those conversations and thinking about that. And we could talk about the person who's transitioning from single to married, or thinking about having a relationship in the future. All that you have built. A lot of people, women, tend to, women and men actually tend to like to put their work first, work, become who you are, who you want it to be. And now you have all this stuff, and now you want to join that with somebody else and create a new life, or new legacy. And so in doing so, there are a lot of ways that we can protect that going forward. So there are pre-nups and post-nups, which we could just call them financial plans.
That was going to be my next question. We're going to get into pre-nups, and I never heard of post-nups before. We're going to get into that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, we could do those type of things. Or a lot of times single people may want to buy property together with, either other single people or partners that they don't want to marry yet, for whatever reason. And there are agreements that we could put in place, like cohabitation agreements, where we live together, we know what our rights and responsibilities are for this property, but yet we're not married. But at least everybody knows what the relationship is. And it's always easier to plan something ahead of time and put things in order ahead of time. And you'll find, like, when relationships break down, when we have in writing what we already decided that we were going to do, it usually holds a lot of weight and avoids a lot of, I guess, litigation, lawsuits, and things like that.
But many times people, when they create a prenup, and we'll talk about post, I never heard of post-nup. Thank you. You done taught me something, girl.
No problem.
When they create a prenup, that might be in the beginning of their investment, in the beginning of their career. So we may have established an agreement of who deserves what based on the work that both parties have done at that moment. But relationships change and responsibilities change. And so 10 years down the line, if I now am the breadwinner, or, you know what I mean, if whatever roles reverse or what have you, or the level of investment or work for one person has shifted to the other, how does that work? Am I now going to be held accountable to what I signed 10 years ago, but now I was the breadwinner, my husband is now? Like, that's not fair. Talk to us.
Well, yes. Honestly, when we put a contract in place, we don't like to say, where are we today and what are we doing right now? We like to say, okay, where are we now, but also where are we going to be, right? And nobody can predict the future, of course, but we can, sit down and sort of think and reflect on who we are and what we think that we might want, at that time. But that's the whole purpose of putting an agreement together, because if this is what we agreed on, if we all had a clear mind and we put this stuff in place, and this is what we need to adhere to. That being said, if it doesn't work for both parties can create a new one or amend, and change what they wanted in the beginning.
Well, I mean, the one who came up is going to want to change it. But the one who fell back, they
right.
All right. So talk to us about prenuptial agreements, because we just been pretty presumptuous right now, assuming that everybody knows what that is.
That's
and then
true.
Talk to us about post-nuptial agreements. Okay.
Yeah. Similar things, right? So a prenuptial agreement means that before you get married, right? Before you put your lives together and become one, essentially, you are going to put down some terms and some agreements of what you expect to happen with your stuff. So, and they don't have to be forever either. It could be, if we're married 5 years or less, this is what's going to happen. If we're married 5 years or more, 5 to 10 years, or, this is what we think should happen with our assets. So you can really plan, like, if we jump into this thing and it doesn't work fairly quickly, I mean, we shouldn't unravel our entire lives that we had before, right? If it just started. But if, we've been in this game for a while, there could be different, there could be different terms there. And so it's flexible. It's really designing, what you guys want for your future. And we don't even have to call them prenuptial agreements, because some people just hear that and they're like, that's a problem for me, but we could just call it your financial plan, your financial future together, or whatever it is, if that makes people uncomfortable, you know what I mean? And then a postnuptial is just, you're already married and you've realized that there are some things that you guys need to iron out. And if you could put your heads together and create an agreement and put that in place, that can also work, right? But I mean, you're already married, so those are harder to do, especially if you're not on the same page. But it allows you to do the same thing. You can still make an agreement that's binding, that will govern the marriage. Okay.
Could a will pretty much iron out some of those, like the financial plan, as well as a post, now I don't even know how to say it, but a post-nuptial agreement? Or are there things that a will would not, and we're going to get into wills in a second, but is there some things that wills can't cover that a post-nuptial agreement would be better suited for?
Yeah, they're kind of two different functions, right? So a post-nup or prenup is going to talk about you know, what we agree, what are our terms during this relationship, right? And how are assets going to be divided if something doesn't happen or if something goes well, whatever the case is. And then so now a will is saying what happens if we die, right? If one of us dies. And a will allows you basically to say exactly what you want to happen with your assets when you die. So I want, well, there's one caveat with a spouse. You cannot disinherit your spouse. So your spouse, depending on the state, they're entitled to different amounts. Yeah, so that's why it's important to have these agreements. if that's interesting to you. So you cannot disinherit your spouse in a lot of states. And so, you know, some states your spouse has to automatically get a certain amount, or they can, like, say if you try to leave it to someone else or whatever the case, they can challenge it. And so, but a will allow you to, you know, tell everyone. Somebody's laughing in the comments. So will allow,
and that's my husband who's crying in the comments.
So a will will allow you to say, okay, I want, you know, this person, this family member to get this. I want my child to get this. You could even name guardians for children in your will and things like that. The only thing about a will, not the only thing, but one of the things that's important about a will that people don't really know, which I'm finding out a lot of people still don't know, is that when you have a will, you still do have to go to court when the person dies. You still have to open an action that's called a probate action and have the court put the person in place who's called the executor, that the person who passed away, whose will it was, put the person in place that they had designated, right? So it still requires that. In some states, it could be really costly, and most states that it takes a long time. So that's where we start to look at trust, if it makes sense for the person.
Okay, so we're going to get into trust in a second. I just want to tell you that my sister's a lawyer, and she works, you know, it's a shame when you have family, you don't even know what they do, but she works for the probate office court in Lower Manhattan.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So I've heard that term probate, and she'll tell me just privately between us and the 32 people on here, that like when celebrities stuff comes through, like she gets to see what they're worth and who's getting what, and if the wife gets which child, and she gives us this. I shouldn't say that, right? All right. No, she doesn't. She don't do that. But you get the point. So I have a little bit of insight on that.
Correct. And you raise a good point. Probate is also very public. So definitely for celebrities, it's not necessarily the best way to go, but if they, you know, unless they want all that information out. And one of the main reasons for that is you don't necessarily want to know when people are coming into inheritances. So you don't want the public to know when your family's coming into inheritances, because there's people, scammers, as we know, who like to prey on people like that and then get into their lives and just try to get their assets. And so that's what makes it a little less ideal. But it's better than having nothing, that's for sure.
So I know that you said in the will, it's a document that someone works with you in order to organize so they know who gets what and how much. But you also said that you don't have the ability in most states to disinherit your. So how does that work? How can I say that my children are going to get the house and my mom is going to get the car? If that's all I have, then by default, by giving those two things away, now my husband got nothing. So how can that work?
Exactly. So if your husband does not contest it, it may go that, you know, the way that you stated. However, if your husband's like, wait, hold up, what happened to me? Then the court will not allow it. So one of those assets will have to be sold and at least give your husband, like for instance, in New York, it's 30% at minimum, you know, then that's going to go to your husband. You know. Understood.
Okay. So are there ways that you can skate around a will? Like other than the husband who gets a minimum 30%? What about, we're talking about mommy, daddy, children, like how are ways that people can, he says, haha, he's very funny. How are ways that people can legally get around wills? Is it possible?
Yeah, it is possible. So one of the tools that are used is a trust. And a trust allows you basically to take your assets out of your name and you put it into this it's really just a document, but it functions sort of like how a business entity functions. So you can put all of your assets into that, which means that the trust will now own all of your assets. You know, for example, in the case of a home, the title to the home will now be in the name of the trust, right? And so the trust allows you, depending on what type of trust, but we'll just say for revocable trust, revocable means that you can change it, right? Okay. You can make changes to it. And so for revocable trust, you can add assets to it. You could take assets away from it. You can be more flexible in how you sort of give your gifts. You know, you could give them over time to say your children, for example, you can, you know, protect it for their lifetime. You know, it's just more, you know, flexibility. It allows you to avoid probate altogether. So they do not have to go to probate court in order to get access to your assets. So the person who you put in charge is going to be called a trustee. And that person is going to, so in your lifetime, you'll be the trustee. So you'll be able to still manage your affairs the same way that you do right now. But when you pass, you'll have somebody who's a successor who come after you, who'll be the trustee and be able to say, okay, this is what, Allison wanted. We're going to give the house to, mom. We're going to give the bank account to your son, or, whoever, right? So that's how that would work. It just allows for more flexibility. And in certain instances, we want to protect also from estate tax. So depending on, the size of your estate, you could face some level of estate tax. And so with trust, there's a lot of creative ways to plan around that to help you to avoid paying those taxes.
Understood. All right. So we've just gotten to the 6:30 mark. And at this time, we're going to be taking questions. So if anyone has any questions, go ahead. Feel free to throw it in the question queue. It is the bubble with the question mark that's at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. We already have one question, so we're going to go ahead and load it up. And I'm sure these questions are for you because I'm just learning so much. Thank you for dropping these gems this evening. So the question says from Miss K, if someone writes out their last wishes on a regular piece of paper, will it be legally accepted or accepted legally?
Okay. I would say most likely no, but it could act as evidence what their assets are, or what their wishes were. So it's going to depend on what the court, finds. Really, a will and that's called a holographic will, is how they consider it. A will needs to be signed, and it needs to be witnessed by two individuals. Each state also has their own signing requirements, but unless it meets those signing requirements, it may not be accepted, for that particular state. So generally no, but maybe. It depends.
So I have a question on top of that. A lot of times when we watch movies and there's like some big reveal of a grandma who was super rich, there's a videotape, and then they play the videotape, and then someone is outraged because they didn't get the money they thought that grandma promised them. So the videotape is not a requirement. Is that just for like dramatic effect? Where does the videotape come into play?
Yeah, that is for dramatic effect. It's not a requirement. I don't know any states that require you to have a recording. It is, some firms see it as a benefit and some firms see it as a downfall. Because if you have a video and the video doesn't reveals that something was done improper, well, now we can invalidate the will, right? So it could help and, show that, yeah, this is what she wanted and this is exactly what, was intended, or it could hurt, right? So probably a better practice would be not to use the will signing as a, as not to use a video of the will signing, but to use a video of just interviewing grandma on what her wishes were, and then that in that case, that would be helpful. But it's not determinative, but it could be evidence,
Understood. We have more questions coming in. Great questions.
Okay.
So Dreams Achieved NYC says, does removing oneself from a deed absolve them from the financial responsibility for a home as a means to lower or limit one's liability?
Okay. So removing yourself from a deed, It does remove you from responsibility for the home, not necessarily the mortgage though. The mortgage could still be in your name. And so that could still hurt, say, for instance, your credit, right? But in terms of liability, like if somebody slips and falls and wants to sue, then no, the person who's no longer on the deed is not responsible for that.
Okay. So someone can be removed from the deed, but still financially responsible because their name is attached to the mortgage.
Correct. So if you're going to remove yourself from a deed, I usually, like, from time to time people ask that, and I tell them, make sure that it's a situation where simultaneously you're taken off of the mortgage, because you're giving away ownership, but you're still responsible for the debt. And who wants that? You know?
Right. You know, it seems, again, only in the particular case of someone getting hurt on the job, it seems like a bigger loss.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Bonita says, if we don't have a will, who does our property go to if we're married?
Okay, if you're married and you don't have a will, your property will likely go to your spouse. In some, well, I shouldn't say that blanketly. It depends, because in some states they will split it between the spouse and the children. And then, say for instance, the spouse and the children don't get along, if the surviving spouse is not the parent. So say they don't get along, the children could sue to have the house sold, and that may not be what you want, you know? So.
Makes sense. Yeah. Our next question is from Cash Transport. If my father has a business and is getting ready to retire, but the family is not listed on anything, oh gosh, there's not enough characters to fit all this. If my father owns his own business and is ready to retire, but the family is not listed on anything, what is the first step to take in order to protect, I assume, the business?
Okay, so he's getting ready to retire. I guess it would depend. I need to know if he's keeping the business or if he's getting rid of the business, and what's happening with the proceeds from that. He probably needs some level of estate planning, you know, in order for the family to benefit from his business, especially if he's in a retirement age.
All right. So what you would say is there's no hard and fast rules. What he needs to do is to find you and start planning. And exactly. Are you, I believe that Cass is in New Jersey. Are you able to practice in Jersey?
Yeah, New York and New Jersey.
Excellent. Ooh, that means you took the bar twice?
Well, instead of a 2-day bar, I took a 3-day bar.
Nice.
Yeah.
my sister, she passed the bar in Connecticut and New York. She said she did Connecticut because she heard that Connecticut was easier. So to boost her morale, she did Connecticut first and passed. And then she did New York and she passed too, so it worked.
I hear that.
Okay.
Whatever it takes.
I am David Lewis says, if you are going through a divorce, can you buy a home or start a business? How can you protect yourself? That's a really good question.
That's a great question. It's going to depend on where you are in the stage of your divorce. I would say generally, not legal advice, you can, once the divorce is filed, you can start to, sort of move on, but it's risky. It depends on if the divorce is contentious and things like that. And if you have sort of like, sometimes they have this thing called an injunction where you cannot sort of move around your assets or use your assets and things like that. Mm-hmm. So it depends really. But generally, once it's filed, it's considered, that line that's being divided. But I wouldn't just go blanketly, with that.
Yeah, so please either hire Sabine or another lawyer before you.
I don't do divorces right now, but I do the agreements, but I don't do the actual divorces. But I have an excellent divorce lawyer if you need one.
Please contact her.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question we have is from Joe Blue. Oh Lord, why are you gonna give me the hard word, Joe? Go ahead, Sabine. You got this.
In a revocable trust, can the property stay safe in there even after divorce? No, if it's in a revocable trust, it's going to be subject to divorce, but it also depends on whether, and subject to divorce just means it's included in, all of your assets. But it also depends on, were those assets separate when you got married? Did they turn into marital assets? And, what's the state of them now? I'm going to say, just based off of your question, that the answer is probably no, they're not safe from divorce, if that's what you're saying, meaning excluded. No.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, I believe we have one more question.
Mm.
Poetic PJ says, can the spouse be a trustee automatically, or do they have to be a designated trustee?
They have to be designated in the trust. So what happens is, typically if you're planning with your spouse, you each would start off as, trustees, co-trustees. If one passes away, you could remain trustee depending on your situation and what's needed to protect you. But in your trust, you're going to say who that trustee is or who's going to be the trustee. It doesn't happen automatically for the spouse, though. It has to be stated.
Okay, and this is the last question that we'll take. It just came in. I don't know if this is within your scope.
Okay.
This is from Joseph. If I want to buy a house using private money, friends and family, do I need to set up syndication?
I mean, I know a little bit about syndication. It kind of just depends on how big it is, right? So it really is I would really need more information. It's not really my sweet spot either, but it depends, Joseph. There's syndication is very specific area of law and requires, someone who does it all the time to be able to tell you. If it's just, friends and family, just a handful of people, most likely you're not rising to that level, but if you're talking about, double digit numbers of people, then I would want you to find out the laws around that.
All right, I lied. Someone just threw a question in, and this is the last question.
Okay.
How can me and my friends go into business together to get an Airbnb if we both have an LLC? I guess they mean two separate LLCs?
Two separate LLCs.
Yeah.
So LLCs operate similar to how we do, right? So it's separate and apart from you, but it can buy things, sell things, enter into agreements and contracts. So both of your companies can purchase a property together as co-owners, right? And then you run the business that way. Or you can do a joint venture, whichever one makes more sense for you depending on your circumstances, where you guys start a business together. Both your companies start a business together and you buy the property. So there are a number of ways that it can be done.
Okay. So Sabine, I'd like to thank you. Can you please let us know where to find you? How can we get on your mailing list? How we can get on a consult to work with you, not just asking a whole ton of questions and thinking they're going to get a whole bunch of free legal advice, right? So tell us, how do we get in contact with you?
Sure. So I'm here on Instagram as Sabine the Purpose Lawyer. I do have my links in my bio. I have my calendar in my bio if you want to set up. I do have free consultations depending on what you're looking for. If not, if it falls outside of that, I have paid consultations. And I also have a YouTube channel, also Sabine the Purpose Lawyer, where I try to put out, content to educate. And that's pretty much it.
So again, anyone who is joined late, I'm Allison from Align with Allison. I'm a dating and relationship coach. I primarily work with women to help them find the love and commitment that they deserve. I'd like to thank everyone who is joining. Oh, I see that this is your law firm.
Yeah.
Oh, you gotta tell us about that part. That's huge. Tell us, what's this law firm stuff?
Yeah, so I'm an attorney, and I've been running my firm for the past 8 years. And thank you. And I have a team of 7. So, like I said, we focus on asset protection. We help, create businesses, we help protect properties, and we help plan legacies and, all that sweet stuff in between as well. So we're just trying to educate the community on how to win and stay protected, and so that we don't have to be starting from scratch at every generation.
Absolutely. And shout out to whoever's running your Instagram page, because I'm the one who's like typing and talking and interviewing and reading notes. I need a team. I need to be more like Sabine. I need to plan with Sabine to get my life together. So thank you so much, Sabine. This has been amazing, and you have dropped so many jewels and been so helpful. So thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. Feel free. I have pinned Sabine's @name, Sabine _ the Purpose Lawyer. Click the link in her bio, get on a call, hire her so you can get your life together, but not only for you, but to establish your legacy moving forward.
Right.
All right.
Thank you so much, Allison. It's a pleasure.
Have a good one. And
you too.
Bye.
Bye.